Richter has always been the star of the Belmont clan, but the more I looked into the story, the more I noticed that for Richter, the ending of Symphony was the start of a long and quiet nightmare. What happened to the man who was supposed to be the master vampire hunter? Well, I do have some answers for you, so let's begin. So, where was Richter right before Symphony of the Night? To understand why Richter's fall was so devastating, we have to look at where he was in 1792. This was the era of Rondo of Blood, and man, Richter was force of nature. In the lore, he is frequently referred to as the Master Vampire Hunter, and honestly, he earned it. I've always been impressed by how he handled the 1792 invasion. Unlike his ancestors, Richter fought with a kind of athletic aggression we hadn't seen before. He was rescuing maidens, backflipping over skeletons, and calling down holy rain like it was nothing. He saved Annette and Maria, and he sent Dracula packing. At that moment, I think everyone, including Richter himself, believed the Belmont legacy was safer than it had ever been. He was the hero of the age, after all. But, peace is a dangerous thing for a person built for war. For about 4 years after his victory, Richter lived as a legend. But then, in 1796, something went wrong. He just vanished. He didn't leave a note and didn't tell Maria where he was going and disappeared. This makes Maria go searching for him when Dracula's castle reappears a year earlier than expected. She finds him, yeah, but, he's not the same person as she remembers. Why is Richter acting so weird in Symphony of the Night? When Alucard first runs into Richter in the heart of the castle, it's one of the most weird moments in gaming. Richter is literally running the place. And his dialogue? He tells Alucard that a vampire hunter has no reason to exist in a world when there's no evil to fight. Let me translate that for you. He says, I want to bring Dracula back so the battle can last forever. That's messed up. Now, I've spent a lot of time thinking about that line. On the surface, it sounds like he's suddenly evil, but it's much more subtle. The Dark Priest Shaft did not walk up and brainwash him with a magic spell. He understood that Richter was directionless in peace. Richter's entire identity was tied to being the Master Hunter. Anyway, Shaft took that subconscious fear of being obsolete and turned it into an obsession. He used a magical orb to possess Richter, but the possession worked by amplifying Richter's own suppressed desires. Richter was being tricked into believing that his only path to purpose was through chaos. Alucard, who has seen his own father succumb to madness, is the only one who knows that this isn't the real Richter. It's a cruel but brilliant plan. Why fight a Belmont when you can turn him into your greatest bodyguard?
Time on this world has come to an end.
What do the different endings actually do with Richter? The fate of Richter Belmont is one of the few things in the series that depends on the player's choices. But the story is very specific about which one is canon. If you take the easy path and kill Richter, you get the bad ending. The castle falls, Maria is devastated, and Alucard cries over the death of a hero who died a traitor. To me, that's the most depressing end for a character ever. But, in the good and best endings, Alucard uses the holy glasses to see the orb controlling Richter. By destroying the orb, the spell is broken. When the castle crumbles and everyone gathers on the cliffs outside, Maria is relieved, of course, but Richter? He's broken. You will feel bad for him in this scene. He watches Alucard, the son of the man he was supposed to kill, walk away after doing the job he failed to do. Richter gets a soul-crushing guilt, because, he was the reason Dracula was able to return early. And Alucard had to wake up and fight his father again. This moment of realization is the real end of Richter's career as an active hunter. He doesn't go back to being the master and carries that guilt like a physical weight, and it's this emotional bridge that leads him to eventually step away. What's going on in Richter's head after all that? If we look at Richter's headspace after Symphony of the Night, it's a dark place. He's dealing with a classic case of warrior's identity crisis. For Belmont, your worth is measured by your ability to resist the darkness. Richter is the first one who failed in a catastrophic way and turned that into the very thing he swore to destroy. That kind of shame doesn't go away, you know? He started to feel that he was unstable and that the Belmont bloodline itself might be a liability. I think he enjoyed the thrill of the battle a little too much, and that realization scared him more than any vampire ever could. He felt aimless, and that emptiness made him vulnerable. Here is where the fear of losing control comes from. Richter feared the part of himself that wanted the battle to go on. Maybe the world would be safer if the Belmonts weren't around to be manipulated. This mix of self-loathing and a genuine desire to protect everyone from himself is what shapes the rest of his life. So what's this Nocturne of recollection thing everyone mentions? A lot of fans don't know that there's a direct follow-up to Symphony of the Night called Akumajo Dracula X Tsuyoku no Yaso Kyoku, or Nocturne of Recollection. It's a radio drama, and it's honestly essential reading, or should I say, listening, for Richter fans. It takes place about a year after the castle fell, and it shows us Richter, who is desperately trying to live a normal life. He's in seclusion, he's quit hunting, he even sends a letter to Maria telling her that he's a cursed human and that she should stay away from him for her own safety. He's basically trying to break his own heart to protect her. But because this is Castlevania, a new vampire named Magnus shows up and starts attacking Maria's village. Richter is forced back into action, but he does it reluctantly. There's a scene where a succubus takes the form of Shaft to taunt him, and you can really feel his trauma. He's terrified of being controlled again. With the help of Alucard and two new hunters, Cyril and Alexis, he manages to win, but he doesn't consider himself a hero afterward, rather like a person who barely escaped a trap. It's this story that finally convinces him that he can't be the face of the Belmonts anymore. So, does Richter ever fully come back, or does he just vanish? After the events of Nocturne of Recollection, Richter Belmont makes a choice to disappear from history. He doesn't go back to the village to be celebrated and chooses a life of total loneliness. Living out the rest of his days alone, he wanted to learn how to exist in peace, and more importantly, he wanted his family to have the same chance. Being a Belmont was a death sentence and a path to madness, and he wished to break that cycle. It's a bit sad that the Master Hunter ended his life as a hermit, but in a way, it's his most selfless act. He recognized his own limits and felt that the world needed a pause from the Belmonts, and the Belmonts needed a pause from the world, vanishing from public life, leaving behind the glory and wishing for a future where his descendants wouldn't have to be tools of war. What happens to the vampire killer after it? This is the part of the lore that changed the franchise. Richter is officially known as the last Belmont to wield the vampire killer for over 2 centuries. Because of his possession and the instability of the bloodline, the decision was made to pass the whip to a different family, the Morris clan. Richter himself is the one who gave up the whip to them. But since the Morrises aren't direct Belmonts, they can't use the whip's full power without it draining their life force. That's why John Morris and Jonathan Morris have such a hard time with it later on. The coolest detail, though, is that the vampire killer itself retains a memory of Richter. In Portrait of Ruin, Jonathan has to fight a spectral version of Richter to unlock the whip's true power. The whip remembers him as the peak of Belmont's strength, but also as the one who lost it. To me, this is the best tribute to Richter. He might have retired, but his strength was so legendary that the whip itself used him as the final test for every hunter that came after him. You aren't worthy of the vampire killer until you can beat the shadow of someone who almost broke the world. Do the Belmonts just vanish after Richter? Following Richter's seclusion, the Belmonts do indeed disappear from the main stage of history. From the late 1700s all the way until 1999, the Belmonts were in a state of absence. This is the era where the Morris family, the Licards, and organizations like the Order of Ecclesia take over the fight. This was partly due to the Nostradamus prophecy, which said that the Belmont shouldn't reappear until the final battle in 1999. But looking at the subtext, it's clear that Richter's failure played a huge role. Okay, here's a theory for you guys. The clan needed to reset and ensure that the next Belmont to hold the whip would be someone as strong as Richter, but with a heart that couldn't be shaken. When Julius Belmont finally appeared in 1999 to finish Dracula for good, he was the fulfillment of everything Richter hoped for. Richter's 200-year gap allowed the family to step back, recover, and return at their absolute strongest. Sometimes the best way to save the world is to step out of the way and let it grow. Even the strongest of us can fall, but it's what we do afterward that defines us. Richter is a complicated guy, and I'm sure you guys might have some theories about his exile. Why don't you share them in the comments below?